This is something that happened to me when I was in my previous house a while back. It all started one night when me and my family returned home from bowling, and my father said that he left the back door unlocked by mistake. But luckily, it appeared as if no one had broken into our house. How wrong we were. Every third night, I'd hear this tapping noise in the floorboards under the carpet ever so slightly. I usually ignored it, as I thought it was just a pipe from the boiler vibrating against the floorboard. When it came to me playing my video games, I'd find my controllers out of place or the game stacks shuffled up. I was kind of a geek that assigned his games from A to Z, but I shook it off because at least it took me away from gaming. Sometimes I'd get these whispers of my name in a very low pitch, which I thought was just my brother playing tricks on me, so I kept replying, "Go back to bed, you crap stain." One night, my father came into my room and said,
"Don't tell me this tapping isn't keeping you awake."
I replied back with a nod, and so we unscrewed the floorboards, and then we saw something you'd never, ever want to see in your entire life. It was this homeless person with bloody bones of an unidentifiable dead animal, and he stared at my dad with a toothless grin and charged at him with a rusty knife. My dad, luckily, was trained in the ways of Krav Maga and disarmed the homeless man and knocked him out. In the meantime, I called the police and explained the situation. A police cruiser came in under 10 minutes and came and arrested the homeless man. A message came through the post saying that the arrested man was wanted for repeated home entries and the murder of an elderly woman. It said that he was jailed for life in a maximum secured prison. I am lucky to still be alive to tell this story. This happened last year when I was 15. Me and my friend, I'll call her Kate, were messing around in our neighborhood one day. We were on the other side of the road, playing around with sparklers and other stuff like that. Suddenly, Kate said to turn around and look behind me. I did, and when I looked at the home behind us, I saw someone looking through the window. I couldn't really tell what he looked like, so I just ignored it and turned back around. A few minutes later, Kate said to look again. I did, but this time, there was a woman with him at the window. They were just staring at us, and I began to feel uneasy. But again, I turned around and ignored them. As the sun went down, I walked back to my house, which was across the street, and Kate went to hers, which was a few blocks away. A couple of hours later, around 10 p.m., my phone lit up. I was watching Orange is the New Black, so at first I ignored it. Then I got another alert, so I picked up my phone and looked at the screen. My 2 alerts were from Snapchat. Someone added me, and their username was something like Jaden with a few numbers after it, and they sent me a picture. I waited until the episode was over to open it. It was a black screen with a message saying,
"Hey."
I ignored that message. Around 6 to 7 minutes later, I got another Snapchat from the same guy, and this time, it was a black screen saying,
"Why didn't you answer?"
Again, I ignored the snap and went back to Netflix. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't look at it. Throughout the episode, I got around 4 more alerts, which I all ignored. Then I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I had 11 alerts. Most of them were black screens saying, "Why aren't you answering?" or "I know you're awake, answer me," but the last one freaked me out. It was a picture of my house, taken from across the street, with a caption,
"Answer me now."
I was stupid, so I didn't screenshot the pictures, but I did block him. I didn't hear anything for a few days, but then I got another alert that someone added me. It was the same usernames as before, but with a 1 after it. Then I got sent multiple snaps. I didn't open any of them because I was in class. 4 hours later, I checked my Snapchat. All the pictures he sent me were pictures of me. Some were during lunch, and some were when I was walking home from school. Again, I blocked the user, but I didn't get any screenshots. Last night, I got a snap of my window, again taken from across the street and from the same user, but this time with a 2 after it. I told my dad, and he freaked out and called the police. When they arrived, I told them everything, but they couldn't do anything since I didn't get any screenshots. I don't know what to do. Update. I deleted Snapchat, but he's found me on all my other social media. I've blocked him on everything, and I'm thinking about just deleting everything. I'll start off with some background. I'm a female, and at the time this happened, I was about 12 years old. I lived in a quiet suburb in South Carolina at the time, and used to just spend hours just walking my dog around the neighborhood because there wasn't much else to do. At the time, we had a 70-pound basset hound named Rufus, who kind of looked like a sawed-off St. Bernard. So I was walking him around in the late afternoon in the fall, and it started to get dark. I was on the other end of the neighborhood from my house when I first saw a beat-up, rusty red pickup truck just kind of driving around. I didn't think a whole lot about it because it's the South, so pickup trucks are all over the place around here and don't automatically mean anything. But as I was walking home, I saw the truck cross the street I was going past and then come back out the other end further down and go back the way I'd come from. To give you an idea of the neighborhood, it was set up like regular blocks, more like a main road and then a bunch of roads that all looped around and came back into the main one. At first, I just figured the guy was lost or something and didn't think much about it, but as I was getting closer to my house and it was getting darker, I saw the truck again. Another thing about my neighborhood was, even though there were a lot of houses, everybody pretty much just kept to themselves in their house for the most part, so there really wasn't anyone outside this time of night, even though it was still fairly early. So I came out of the neighborhood onto the road to my house, and the truck was there again, this time just parked on the side of the road, facing the road I came out of. I turned onto the road to my house, and it started moving, driving slowly behind me with its lights out. Now, if you know anything about basset hounds, they're not exactly the most threatening kind of dogs. They're short and stubby, kind of like big dash hounds with these giant ears and goofy faces, so even though Rufus was a big dog, he wasn't exactly the greatest guard dog. They also don't walk very fast and tend to trip over their ears when they run, so I was stuck with him setting the pace. With him weighing almost as much as I did, it wasn't like I could reach down and pick him up and try to run or anything. So here I am, walking down the dark road in a quiet neighborhood with my slow-ass dog and this creepy-ass truck behind me. I knew I couldn't really run from it and doubted that anyone would hear if I tried to scream or something if he started to come after me. So finally, I came up with a plan, even if it was probably a stupid one. When I got to one of the handful of streetlights on the street, I stopped and turned around and just stared the truck down. The truck stopped moving and just kind of sat there about 30 feet away from me, like it was trying to look like it was parked or something. I stood there and stared at that truck for what felt like forever, but was probably around 2 or 3 minutes. Finally, after a while, the truck started moving again, turned on its lights, and went down off another road, and I booked it into somebody's backyard and took the backyards the rest of the way home. I never told my mom about the creepy truck because I knew she'd freak out and probably wouldn't let me take the dogs out alone anymore. This story didn't happen to me. It happened to my mom. I was just scrolling around on another Spooky Readers channel when I saw a video called Creepy College Stalker Stories. That title immediately caused me to remember something my mom once told me. I was younger at the time, about 12 to 13, so I didn't think much of it. My mother is now 55 years old, and I'm currently 17. Now that I come to think about it, her story is a lot creepier than I first thought. I don't recall what caused her to start talking about this event, but let's go. Let me start off by saying that at the time of the story, my mother was going to college at Texas Tech. She was getting a law degree. I forgot which year she was in. One night, my mom was walking back from her tennis team's practice, thinking that she was all alone. There was no one on the streets and the streetlights were on. At one point, she started to feel suddenly uneasy and decided to take a glance behind herself. What she saw made her become very wary. A tall, large man was walking behind her a few meters away. I recall her mentioning that it wasn't strange to see another young adult walking around at night, but this person didn't seem very young. Judging by the man's build, she estimated he was around 30 to 50 years old. It definitely wasn't a college professor, since most of them weren't out at that time of night and were much shorter than this man was. Just to double check that this was a normal pedestrian and not a creeper, my mother decided to pick up the pace. She was now speed walking down the street. A loud sound of shoes hitting the ground behind her caused her to turn around and see the tall man was now sprinting towards her. Noping the fuck out of there, my mom booked it. Due to her being very athletic, she managed to stay a good 5 to 7 meters ahead of the guy. Unfortunately, he too was quite fast. She took a sharp turn around the corner and ran into her apartment building. Her apartment was on the ground floor. She quickly unlocked the door and ran inside and locked it. My mom didn't turn on the light so the man wouldn't think she was in there. Next to the door, there were 2 large windows with see-through curtains. Peeking through the window, she saw the man approaching her apartment. Thinking quickly, my mom purposely fell to the floor and shuffled to the next wall, laying there so in case he were to look in, he wouldn't see her. Yup, that's exactly what he did. Apparently his shadow could be seen through the curtains as he leered in. The guy stayed there for what seemed to be 20 to 30 minutes before backing away. A note was slipped under her door, and then he was gone. My mom didn't get up until she knew for a fact that he was indeed gone. Getting up and looking around, she double-checked to make sure the man was gone. Thank goodness he was definitely gone. Feeling relieved that the guy had left, my mother decided to see what was on the paper. The piece of paper was mostly blank, with a few words written very large in the middle. The note read,
"A hard man is good to find."
Apparently the creep had reverted the old saying, "A good man is hard to find," to that. Yeah, my mom went to the police the next day and filed a report. They took her statement and the note and said they'd keep an eye out. I don't recall if they ever caught the guy or not. The world will never know. Okay, so this happened to me last year. Keep in mind this is told in the perspective of a female. I'd started school at the local community college. I was looking to make new friends since I've never really had the opportunity before. I was the weird fat kid throughout elementary and high school. College was a chance for me to reinvent myself, to actually make friends and fit in for once. It's college. No one gives a fuck if you're weird, and you're all just trying to get through finals, after all. Well, I had a class with this one kid. Let's call him Creep, because that's what he was. Anyway, me and Creep had our ITE class together. I'd see him every day, but didn't talk to him much. He stayed in his corner of the room. I sat with my friend and an older lady we'll name Jay. I had a TARDIS backpack. Yeah, I know. It's not bigger on the inside, by the way. Anyway, he saw this and said it was cool. I said that was cool, and we talked a little bit about our interests as we walked to our next class. He was a cosplayer, as was I, and we both enjoyed BBC programs along with anime. He seemed friendly, and I went about my day. Things got uncomfortable after that. He started showing up everywhere that I did. Mostly, he would invite himself to lunch with me and my friend S. He was disgusting. We went to lunch one day and he ordered this burger with peppers, onions, and mayo. Mayo is the bane of my existence, mind you. He didn't use napkins. The thing smelled terrible and he wiped it on his already dubiously stained pants. It wasn't pleasant, to say the least. He kept popping up places and inviting himself to lunch, and I was just beyond done with him. I have a habit of attracting weird people. I don't know why. I was just ready to cut and run if it came to it. Anyway, he invited himself to lunch with me again when S wasn't present. He said he had a crush on S, and I knew S went through a bad breakup. I told him to leave her alone, but he was insistent on me seeing if she liked him. I said no, leave her alone. He left after that, and I enjoyed my shitty spaghetti. Then the really freaky thing happened. I was leaving to go to my car one day and ran into him. We talked a bit as I was trying to get away from him, but he was insistent on talking. Eventually, I tried to excuse myself, saying that I was going to my car and I'd talk to him later. He followed me. He said it was fine and walked with me towards my car. He then proceeded to tell me a funny story about him getting drunk and punching his crazy ex in the face. Like that would totally impress me or some shit. I did what any normal person would. I looked him in the eye and said, "No!" Got in my car and drove off. He fucked off and left me alone after that. That wasn't really the creepy part though. No. I learned this a few weeks ago. He's killed someone before. Apparently, he got in a fight and stabbed someone in self-defense. The circumstances were more than shady though, but the police in my area do fuck all. The guy creep stabbed ended up dying. So, yeah, I was stalked by someone who'd killed another person. Ain't I lucky? This was in January of 2016. I'd gone up to the shopping center that's about a 30-minute walk from my house. I would have taken the bus up there, but it only stops at the shopping center once an hour. While I would usually take the bus home from the shopping center near my house, the bus wasn't due for another 45 minutes by the time I had done what I needed to do, and my 10-year-old brother was home alone. My mom has no problem with me leaving my brother home alone for an hour or two because he can take care of himself for that long. So I decided to walk back to my house instead of waiting basically an hour for the bus. On the way home, I saw a man, maybe 40 to 45 years old, walking in the opposite direction to me. I was walking south, he was walking north. As he turned the corner to walk towards me, I got the impression that he didn't look right, probably because as he was walking, he was just staring at me. As he walked past me, I got a sinking feeling, like when you're on a plane and it starts its descent. As I continued to walk, I felt like someone was following me. So when I got to the bus stop, I made it look like I was checking the bus times, which gave me an excuse to turn around, and once I did, my heart started racing. This fucker had changed direction and turned 180 degrees to walk in the same direction as me. He was walking faster than he was before, and this freaked me the fuck out. I was close to the road that I would usually turn up to get to my street. I turned up the street and had walked about 25 meters up it when I heard crunching of a chip packet that I knew I had passed. He was still behind me. I decided I'd cross the road to put more distance between us and to also get to the street that was across from me. From here, I could go a longer way home. This longer way home had a lot of corners, making following me a lot harder to do. This street also had a lot of teenagers who were at home due to it being summer holidays, so if the guy tried anything, there were a lot of people who would likely hear me screaming. Now, you may be wondering, why didn't you call the police? Well, I'd been stupid and left my phone at my house, so I had no chance of calling the police while walking. Even if I did have my phone, I probably wouldn't have called out of fear of provoking something. I'm about 172 centimeters and weigh 64 kilograms. While my weight is mostly muscle, I'm not large enough to take on someone who is 2 meters tall and looked like they weighed twice what I did. So I was going along the long route when I turn and look behind me. He was still there. This is where I started my plan to get back to my house. I turned the next corner and sprinted along the path as quietly as I could. I was on my house's street. If I was going straight home, I would have gone left, but I went straight ahead towards a smallish park that was just up the street from my house. The reason I did this was because I could go up through the park and around to get to my house. As I was crossing the road to get to the park, I looked back and I saw him jogging up the path I'd just come from. He saw me and started sprinting towards me. Luckily, I had a 150-meter head start. I ran through the park and around to the left. The area behind the park is like a maze, so this gave me an advantage. Once I was behind the park and out of his sight, I continued sprinting for a house that had an old shed in its front yard. The shed was empty and the door was open, as always. So I hid in there and I was able to look out through a mirrored window. I saw him and he was looking around for me. He then walked the way that I was planning on going to get to my house. I was still too scared to leave the shed, so I waited for about 10 minutes before I saw him walking back towards the park on his phone. I heard part of what he was saying to the other end.
Yeah, I lost her, but I think she lives around here. She's a crafty bitch, though.
After he passed, I waited another 10 minutes before leaving the shed and sprinting towards my house. I called my mom, who called the police, who, in turn, called me. I gave a description of the man and refused to leave the house alone for a week. Luckily, I've never seen him again, but the police report hasn't come up with anything. Basic information about me. I'm currently a 17-year-old female who gets mistaken as a 21 to 24-year-old since I got into university early. Forgive me if I mess up on my English some, it's my second language. First of all, let me start by saying that I'm used to being stalked. I guess since I have the face of a child but the height of an adult, that attracts creepers. I'm so used to it, I've actually made a system on how I can check if the stalker is dangerous or not. This story happened about 4 to 5 months ago. I was a student at a university in Marbella, Spain at the time this incident happened. I'm the kind of person who likes to get to class before everyone else, to set up pranks. One day, as I was walking to the university early in the morning, I was listening to music when I heard the sound of a car creeping behind me. There weren't any sidewalks, causing the students to walk on the side, if not the middle of the road. Thinking it was a car that wanted to get by to go to work or something, I moved aside. I pulled out my earplugs just as a safety measure and looked at the driver. The driver was almost leaning out of his window entirely, staring creepily at me. His eyes looked as if they were about to pop out. You know, the eyes of someone who does a whole lot of drugs. Being a little startled by this, I pretended to walk on as if nothing was wrong, occasionally glancing at him. I had seen him around before. He and some of his companions would go up to a lot of the girls and try to talk to them and get them inside their big black car. Some of the girls even caught the men trying to take pictures of them. Every time someone would pass their small shack of a home, where all 4 to 5 men lived, it stunk of weed. Now that I come to think of it, I wonder why the police never did anything about them. I had finally reached the tunnel one has to cross to get to the university trail. The trail is a run-down road up a hill with nothing but farms around it. So convenient. Still hearing the car creep behind me and getting slower as I got closer to the tunnel, I sprinted as soon as I reached the tunnel, out and onto the trail. I hadn't stopped running till I reached the university's main building. I had looked back and saw the car make a U-turn at the head of the trail, and it disappeared into the distance. Panting, I tried to open the building's doors. Oh great, it was locked. I pulled out my phone quickly and asked a friend why it was locked at this time. Turns out, drumroll please, it was a holiday that day, meaning I got up for no freaking reason. Ugh! After collecting myself, I walked back down the trail stealthily and glanced around everywhere. The car nor the man was in sight. Relieved, I decided to walk through the tunnel at ease. Once I was back on the road, I heard that familiar car creeping behind me. Taking a quick glance behind my shoulder, yup, you guessed it. It was Creeper Guy, still staring, still with half his body sticking out of the window. Thinking quickly, I remembered there was a small fence up ahead, and if one were to jump over it, it would land them right into a forest with lots of cover that I know like the back of my hand. I jogged up to the fence and leaned against it facing the road and the car. I pulled out my phone pretending to text someone while I was actually filming the guy's actions. The man's car almost came to a halt and I was ready. Oh, I forgot to mention that I'm a blue belt in Taekwondo too. The man seemed as if he was about to open the door when another car came up behind him. The car seemed to be perfectly normal. In fact, the driver wasn't too happy about my stalker's car driving so slowly. More and more cars began pulling up behind Mr. Creeper, forcing him to move on down the road. I watched him with a smirk as his face turned into a look of anger at me, the kind of face a baby would make. I've noticed that a lot of my stalkers make that face when they fail. I watched him watch me until he looked away, having to see where he was driving off to. I waited until he turned the corner, knowing that he might make a U-turn again. I sprinted back to my apartment, double-checking if I was being watched before I went in. I did see that guy again on a couple of occasions, and he and his buddies even tried to talk to me, even tried to touch my arm as I walked by. I'll just let you imagine what I did. Now that I come to think of it, this is a lot creepier than I originally viewed it as. Just exactly what were they up to? I am now at a different university that's much better, especially with security. It's online. Thanks for reading this.